computer this time. I do record my audio separate, and also this entire interview will go on YouTube as well. So
Great.
I should note that, because sometimes people like to have it in the background, while they're cooking or something like
Yes.
that, and they
Yep.
like to see people's faces and glance up once in a while. YouTube's it's a big deal, I think. So that's another place you got to be.
Thank you for all the advice. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay, Matt, I am going to hit record now in three, two, one. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sandy K Nutrition, Health and Lifestyle Queen. Today with me, I have a special guest. His name is Matt Zemon. Did I pronounce that right?
You
Zemon?
did. You did
Okay,
indeed.
good, good. So Matt received his Master of Science in Psychology and Neuroscience of Mental Health with honors from King's College London. He is the co-founder of Happy, a mental wellness company that specializes in psychedelic-assisted ketamine therapy, along with digital therapeutics that promote life-transforming outcomes. Matt was the co-founder and chief strategy officer of Psychable, an online community connecting people who would like to explore the healing power of psychedelics with a network of practitioners and psychedelic-based treatments, and the co-founder of Take 2 Minutes, a nonprofit dedicated to helping individuals improve their mental health and well-being. Matt is also the author of Psychedelics for Everyone, a beginner's guide to these powerful medicines for anxiety, depression, addiction, PTSD, and expanding consciousness. And I'm sure you can all guess, we are going to talk all about psychedelics. Everybody's hearing about psychedelics and talking about it. So I think it's important to put some fact behind a discussion on it. And who better to do that with than Matt? So, with that, welcome, Matt. Thank you so much for coming today.
Sandy, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So, everybody always has a story, Matt. And I feel that often it is our stories that really fuel our passion. So, maybe you can tell us a little bit about yours.
Yeah, so I fell into this space of psychedelics and exploring consciousness kind of by accident. I had some friends who had hired a guide to do a guided magic mushroom or psilocybin journey, and they invited me to participate. And at that time, I was not a drug user. I tried pot a few times in my life. It just wasn't for me. Wasn't really even a big drinker. And I was like, I don't know if I really want to do this. And they said, no, come on. You love to learn. This is a chance to really learn about yourself. You love to travel. And this is like taking a big journey in your mind. You should do this. So I did. It was way out there for me. And in this single experience, this first experience, I should say, I was able to reconnect with my mom, who died when I was 22. She was 49. Um, and I had this incredible feeling of safety and love. And almost in the next instant, I realized I don't normally feel safe and loved in my everyday life. And actually, I couldn't even remember feeling truly safe and loved. And I thought, okay, something's going on. What is this? I thought about, had insights into my fear of dying young, realizing that's not my story. I mean, just kind of insight after insight after insight in this very first journey. So as I finished that journey, my mind was really blown open, and I wanted to learn more about this. So I did kind of a two-part process. I went back to school with that degree you talked about,
Mhm.
and then I also started exploring different spiritual leaders, MDs, PhDs, people who exploring different compounds with different methods and means of administration, and just kept diving deeper into exploring consciousness. And now I'm really hyper focused on the spiritual connection with psychedelics, but also talking quite a lot to the medical community about how they can incorporate ceremony, and then to the ceremonial community about how they can incorporate medical best practices. But it's been never in my wildest dreams that I think you and I would be talking about psychedelics, Sandy.
Or that you write a book on it too,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. No, it was I mean I was that whole just say no campaign with the egg in the frying pan that worked on me. I believed I was going to fry my brain. There was no medical use, and I stayed away. But I've now learned that that was a lot of propaganda I was being fed.
Well, yeah, I actually did a show on psychedelics. It's almost 2 years ago, but I guess about a year and a half ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to really look at this in a different light. Um, and like you have different thought processes when it comes to what's been ingrained, what's been entrained, what have we been taught. And I have to ask this, and this is not really going in any sort of order, but it just came up in my mind when you said that, you weren't really a big lover of pot or anything like that. And here in Toronto, I don't know where you are if it's legal, but cannabis is legal. Like
Mm.
everybody smokes weed now or does some sort of form of cannabis, whatever it is, gummies or whatever. It's a big deal here now because it's legal, right? Um, but why is it? Because I did mushrooms when I was in university in my 20s. But why is it different when you do it at a young age like that versus a little bit more mature? Why would it be different? Because when we were in our 20s, like it was like, hey, let's do some shrooms. And it was all about fun. And why is it different? Why does it, or is it different?
Oh, I think it can be different. It doesn't have to be. I think let me answer the question. It is, I believe, because of the intention and the attention that we're able to bring at this age of life, this stage of life. Are
Ah,
there people in their 20s who can come with great intention and attention to the process? Of course. But I think when we round 50s, 40s, we we're more in some ways we're more confident in who we are. In other ways, we realize how much we don't know and that we're still looking for. I mean, it's kind of amazing. I turned 50 a year ago, and it's like there's still a lot of questions out there that that I think at our age group we want to explore. And this is a technology that is uniquely suited for this. I also think a number of us, as we get to 50, we've tried therapy for years. We've tried antidepressants or anti-anxiety medication. We've tried mindfulness. We've tried exercise. We've tried more sleep. We've done all the things. We've checked the boxes, and there's still questions.
yeah.
So sometimes these the psychedelic catalysts. So I don't like thinking of them as cures. I think of them as catalysts where we can quiet down the default mode network or quiet down that inner narrator, give us room to look inside, have neurons fire together that haven't fired together in a long time. It literally allows us to think differently. And then
Mm,
with that glimpse of what's possible, we then can make really profound behavioral changes moving forward, which
mm.
again, I think a lot of us in our 40s, 50s, 60s, we want to do.
I like that answer. That makes a lot of sense to me because your intention at 20 or 25 is very different than your intention, now, right? Where you're kind of questioning things and thinking to yourself, where do I want to go? What do I believe in this? And I think that some people can get there without
Of
psychedelics,
course,
right?
sure. Yeah.
But a lot of people can't. And a lot of people can't quiet the mind in order to even start the process, right?
Yeah, I think that's one of the incredible things about psychedelics. And I mean, what some of the research at Johns Hopkins has shown is this is something that people can do, many people can do just once in their life. And it gives them a marker for what can be done in these other non-medicine based states, whether that's breath work, whether it's meditation. It just gives them, again, it gives them a glimpse, helps them remember that they are loved, that they are enough, that they don't have to do anything to be worthy. Um, and again, and then they know that no one's, it's not like someone's told them that. It's not an intellectual exercise. It's something that they feel in their body. after these psychedelic experiences.
Yeah,
And that can be really life changing for people.
I believe that. Okay, we kind of skipped ahead a little bit, which is okay too. But let's first talk about what psychedelics are, because some people don't really even understand,
Yeah.
what are the groups of substances that are used normally in psychedelics? What are they?
Yeah, I love that question. So psychedelics, even the word is loosely translated to psyche and delios, Greek words that mind or soul manifesting. The other word that people use a lot is entheogen, which is essentially saying we're using these substances for connection with a higher power, whatever that is to you. So it makes it more of a spiritual experience to use the word entheogen versus psychedelic. When people think about psychedelics, typically the most common ones people think about are magic mushrooms, LSD, ayahuasca, peyote, ibogaine, DMT, 5-MeO DMT, ketamine, the only legal psychedelic in all 50 states down here, is considered a psychedelic. But there are hundreds of different psychedelics out there. And then just a quick disclaimer on this. I mean, first, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a lawyer, so take all this with a grain of salt. But not my book is called Psychedelics for Everyone. I don't mean that literally everyone should take a psychedelic. What I do believe is psychedelics are good for society. But there are people with certain pre-existing conditions or who are taking various prescriptions or supplements where taking a psychedelic or some psychedelics may not be safe for them.
Oh, can you
So
run through that, Matt? Can you just
I
quickly?
can run through some, and then I
Yeah.
can also point people to spiritpharmacist.com, who
Okay.
is he's a PsyD. He does consults all over, virtual consults all over Canada and Toronto, and he'll look at your specific health situation, what you're taking. But I'll give a couple examples. And if
Okay.
people on SSRIs really shouldn't take MDMA, for example. So we're hearing a lot about MDMA in the press these days,
Yes.
specifically for treatment resistant post traumatic stress disorder. But people with on an SSRI taking MDMA, it's not a good idea. Psilocybin, on the other hand, roughly 50% of the population can take it while being on an SSRI. The other, maybe another 25% can take it, but they need a stronger dose. And then there's some people it just doesn't work when they're on the SSRI.
Oh, interesting. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know that.
Yeah, that's where, and we can talk about microdosing here in a little bit, but one
Yeah.
way to find out if you can take a large dose of psilocybin and be on an antidepressant is take a very small dose and see if you feel anything. Or a little, I mean, not a tiny, but take a little bit of a dose. If you can feel something, that's a good indicator that you can probably take psilocybin. But there's again, Dr. Ben Malcolm in that Spirit Pharmacist website, he has a lot of guides to the different interactions. Ayahuasca is one that's tremendously dangerous for people who are on different antidepressants.
I've heard that. I have heard that.
And then ketamine, because it works in your glutamate system, that's pretty much open for people on antidepressants. So so some people who are even tapering off are using ketamine kind of as a scaffolding as they are moving off of the antidepressant. So that's another option that's open for people.
Okay, so a big possible
Mm-hmm.
contraindication would be SSRIs.
Mm-hmm.
So that's good to know. And you kind of mentioned natural supplements too.
Yeah, there are some like St. John's wort and
Oh
some
yeah.
other things. But then the other thing to watch out for is, and this is subtle, but I'll try to explain this the best I can. A lot of the research, it's been hard to research psychedelics just because of the prohibition we've lived through. So the researchers have done all these different exclusions of groups. So if you're 1 degree, one family member away from someone who's had schizophrenia or bipolar, there's not a lot of research on psychedelics out there for you.
Right.
Um, if you yourself have had schizophrenia or bipolar, there's again not a lot of research. I think the general consensus is if you're schizophrenic, psychedelics, period, probably not a good idea. Bipolar, um, there's a lot of people who say as long as you're not in a manic state, you
Mm,
might be able to do a psychedelic. But again, I would tread there carefully.
okay.
Um, Younger people, 18 to 25, with severe depression, again, being and a family member who is bipolar or schizophrenic, it's probably a little bit dangerous because you don't know if that's about the zone when those things present.
Yes.
Um, Depression, no family member, maybe. So it's again, it's worth getting a consult if you're on any of these I'd call them edge cases. But even like I'll give one more example, and this is really cool. At the University of Toronto is doing work right now with autism and psychedelics. And there's a group with a weekly call-in. Not a lot of research yet, but Canada's leading the way. Yay, Toronto!
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, and it's
That's rare.
beautiful.
I'm going to say that's rare.
Well, I don't, and I'm not sure how University of Toronto picked this up, but
I don't know either.
like I've talked to a couple members of this organization, and one said, I wasn't able to read other people's emotions until LSD. It opened up a whole world of visual cues that I was unaware of. And I thought that was interesting. This other person I talked to in this autism and psychedelics circle said, yeah, I had an incredibly flat affect, and LSD for me opened up my ability to show on the outside what I was feeling on the inside.
Mm,
And and I think University of Toronto is going to dig into this and what are the possibilities for psychedelics with people with autism.
super interesting. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I, so here's the other thing I want to ask just while you're talking about it. You said LSD. So there's natural psychedelics
Mm-hmm.
versus synthetic,
Yep.
right? Is LSD the same as MDMA or
It is not.
it's not?
So it is not.
Maybe explain because there is more natural, like ayahuasca is more natural, psilocybin,
Is natural, and so is
natural.
ibogaine is natural. So ibogaine is being used. Actually, again, Canada is a little bit ahead of the states with ibogaine use. For there are very few drugs out there that can help people in with opioid addiction. Ibogaine is showing to be pretty powerful for that.
It's probably because of
It
what's going on in BC. There's an area in BC where they call it East Hastings, where there's high drug use. I don't know if you know that because you're not from here, but that's probably why they're leading the way. But it's interesting because also with Health Canada, they're trying to limit natural health products right now. So
hmm,
I find it very confusing and conflicting at the same time. Sorry, I had to put that in there.
put that in.
Yeah.
Um, so on the natural side, yeah, people think about mushrooms, they think about ayahuasca, they think about peyote, they think about
Yeah.
mescaline. So these cactus-based psychedelics. And then ibogaine is iboga is the African root that where ibogaine comes from. Um, and then with the synthetic, people are talking about LSD, MDMA, ketamine, and again, there's lots and lots and lots of synthetics. The there becomes an argument, which again can get a bit woo woo, but I'm again going to try, which is we're nature. You're nature, I'm nature. We're all connected. So anything that we're making is also nature. So again, I get that that's a bit abstract, but I think when it comes to psychedelics, what historically cultures used what they had access to. So
Yeah.
here in 2023, we have access to synthetics and to natural, and they both can make profound happenings happen. The MDMA research down here is again, this is phase 3 clinical trials. So and with people where nothing's worked. I mean, picture veterans, first responders, victims of sexual assault. No existing pharmacological solution, no existing therapy has worked. A little bit of therapy, 3 sessions of MDMA, some more therapy. 67% no longer have PTSD. 88% have a clinically significant improvement in symptoms. The numbers are huge.
That's
And that is
massive.
why, yeah, it's massive. So we're going to have either the end of this year or beginning of next, MDMA should be re-legalized here in the States, and then it'll follow to Canada and to England and around from there. And then the research on psilocybin has been focused on terminal patients. So it's not that the psilocybin is going to change the they're not going to cure the people. What it's going to do, or what it does, is it allows them to have a better quality of life during this final chapter and to interact with their family in a different way, to lift some of the depression and anxiety that comes with a terminal diagnosis. And the results there have been so powerful that the FDA has given it breakthrough therapy designation. And again, beautiful research being done for that population where they can't mess around with antidepressants for 14 weeks to see if it possibly works. They need
Yes.
something quickly to lift the depression and the anxiety.
Here's a question. What about have any studies been done on the use of psychedelics for chronic pain?
Of course, yeah. So specifically ketamine is used quite a lot in pain management as an alternative to opioids. Um, and then there's other research. Sorry, and also with cluster headaches specifically, there's a lot of so migraines and such.
Yeah.
There's a lot of research. Um, and then there is not as much research, but a lot of stories and anecdotal work about um, the ability for mushrooms and LSD and ayahuasca to get to the root of internal trauma, which then is manifested in bodily pain and has caused some pain to go away.
Um,
And that's really interesting work.
that is so powerful, Matt.
Mhm.
Like I've done shows on that. And do you know who Dolores Cannon is?
I don't.
You know, she was a massive spiritual hypnotist, like
Okay.
50 years. She's very
Mm.
worldwide known. Anyway, her daughter wrote a book called Soul Speak, and I'm going to be interviewing her, but it's basically how certain traumas affect
Hmm.
pain in the body. And then do you know Dr. Bradley Nelson?
Sure.
I interviewed with him a few
Oh,
months
very
ago.
cool.
Yeah, and the body code, the emotion
Yep.
code, and how these emotions, these traumas get trapped. I feel all of this is a very powerful segue into a whole other way of helping people, including psychedelics as well.
Absolutely. And you have up there, I actually think he lives in Toronto, is Dr. Gabor Mate. Have you heard of him?
Yes, I do know exactly who he is.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
would be good for this show.
Yeah.
I mean, he has a beautiful film, The Wisdom of Trauma. He um he talks a lot about how w- it's so easy. Let me try this. It's so easy for us to look at I guess the people with substance use challenges on Hastings Street and
Yeah.
look down upon them.
Yeah.
Um, and but as a society, we're funny with how we judge different things. So me, I was a workaholic. I definitely abandoned family for work over and over and over in my younger years. That's not looked down upon. And then there are people with all sorts of other manifestations, whether it's overeating, whether it's
Yes.
gambling, whether it's pornography, whether it's codependence. There's lots of ways that we represent, or sorry, that we manifest um, trauma, self-soothing and trauma-related activities, and we don't judge them equally as a culture.
100%. 100%. Because um, it's just like what you're saying. Like what's going on? Has anybody ever assessed or taken the time to assess what's actually going on with those people who are on the streets who are heavy drug users? Um, it's anyway, I mean, there's a whole mess there that we
There
could get
is.
into. And it's not just East Hastings in BC. There's other parts in the world,
Absolutely.
obviously. Um,
We're really good as a culture of moral preaching and
yeah.
medical sedation. So the industry, the psychiatry industry is about getting a normal population, it feels to me. So it's about let's give antidepressants, let's numb the symptoms,
Yes.
antidepressants, anti-anxiety, mood stabilizers, hypnotics. It's and we and we're in, at least in our country, I'm not sure how it is in Canada, a lot of this is like 10-minute wellness visits and you just repeat, repeat, repeat. There's no path to get off these medications that were never meant to be decades or 20-year medications. Um, and for the research is pretty clear, and I'll use antidepressants as an example. If it works for you, that's amazing. And they do work for roughly 40% of the population. Um, so no, if it works, great. But if it doesn't work, that's not you failing the medicine. That's not anything wrong with you. It's the medicine failing you. And there
Yes.
just hasn't been another option. Um, and I don't think people knew really what the side effects were. You get the list. Oh, it's going to cost this, it's going to cost that. But no one says, like, oh, and by the way, 73% of the people who are taking this antidepressant are going to have sexual dysfunction. 73%. That's a big price tag.
Yeah.
Or, oh, suicidal ideation if you're younger, weight gain, lethargy. It's a price tag.
Yeah.
Um, and with no, and then, oh, and by the way, you're going to be addicted. So then coming off of these is going to be very, very, very hard
And could be potentially dangerous.
and potentially dangerous,
Yeah.
depending. Yes, if you don't come off, again, going back to that spirit pharmacist I was talking about earlier, he's got a whole tapering guide, which is about how do you slowly wean your way off of these medications if that's something you want to do.
Yeah.
But these psychedelic medicines don't have anywhere near those types of side effects. And most side effects with psychedelics subside when the medicine comes out of the body. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Let's get
it's a
into
very
that.
different.
Let's
Sure.
get it. Okay. Maybe because I have so many questions for you, Matt. Like there some are on paper, but a lot of them are still here. Um, we should probably start this part of the conversation by describing the difference between microdosing and taking a regular dose, and why would one choose one over the other?
It's a great, great question. Great place to start. So let's start with the regular dose.
Okay.
When people are taking, and I'll just pick one, people taking mushrooms and they're taking it in a ceremonial setting, they're probably taking somewhere between 3 and 5 grams of mushrooms just for just picking one substance and what's happening. When they take that large of an amount of that substance, they're going to go on about a 6 hour journey. And during that time, they're gonna go through waves of different thoughts and insights and visuals and items. People tend to choose that type of experience when they want a soul search, when they want to. The joke is they want to take years of therapy in an afternoon, and that's, yeah, that's kind of when people do that, a large dose. Ketamine, because we talked about that, again, it's a legal psychedelic. If you take a full dose of ketamine, it's about a 1 hour journey, 40 minutes to an hour. Again, similar purposes. Ketamine works a little bit differently, that people tend to take 6 different 1 hour sessions over about 6 weeks to kind of get that full experience versus psilocybin when you're going to do it one time and have a 6 hour journey. Um, when people talk about microdosing, this is when they're taking a tenth to a 20th of a full dose. And most of the time, although there's exceptions, most of the time when people say I'm microdosing, they're talking about microdosing mushrooms or microdosing LSD. And again, there are people who microdose what Shuma and other things, but mushrooms and LSD are typically what they're doing. And the goal with microdosing is that you're taking a sub-perceptual, meaning you don't feel it, or sub-intoxicating, that it's so little that you can still function. You can drive, you can go about your day, you can work, but it's a very, very small amount. And the logic is I'm not doing this for any deep soul searching. I'm doing this as an alternative to antidepressants or anti-anxiety to make the blues bluer, turn the grays down. I want to feel more connected. I want to feel more loved. I want to feel more creative. And microdosing is a potential way to get there. I will tell you that the research is split on this. There is some research that says, yeah, absolutely, this is exactly what this does. Go for it. And then there's other research that says, it's more like a placebo. People just want this to do these things, and therefore it does those things.
Oh, interesting.
So it is mixed. But there are a number of people who really enjoy the microdosing experience. There's a great book for women specifically. Anyone can read it, but it's a woman author called a Good Day, a Great Day, where she microdoses for 30 days and writes about it in a very beautiful manner and what her experience was. Um, and then there are good courses out there. A Third Wave has a great course on microdosing. Um, You can go to my website and download a free guide to microdosing. Psilocybin, which is a Canadian company, has a free guide to microdosing. Lots of different information out there. People, a couple other things here, just to get this started. When people microdose, there's two protocols that they typically follow. So protocol number one is the Dr. James Fadiman protocol, and he said, look, take it on day one, still in your body on day two. It comes out on day three. Repeat on day four, and
Hmm.
you do that for about 4 weeks in a row, and then take 2 weeks off. So that's the Fadiman protocol. Day one, skip 2, 3, take it again on day four, do that for
Not
4 weeks and take it off. Yep.
what what does he say should be, or what would the outcome be, or what is he expecting the outcome to be if you do it that way in that protocol?
It's again all the same reasons. People creativity, connectivity,
Okay.
anti-anxiety, anti-depression, and you're not. It's not getting to a point where you have to titrate up on dose. That
Right.
you can maintain the same dose as long as you flush it out every 4 weeks or so.
Okay.
And then Paul Stamets, who's a mycologist, real famous mycologist down here, he says, yeah, it's a little bit complicated. Just take it 4 days in a row, take it off for 3 days. And he also agrees, though, every 4 weeks, take a 2 week break. So 4 days on, 3 days off, take 2 weeks off every 4 weeks. And then he adds one more layer, what's called the Stamets stack. He says, add to your lions or add to your microdose, and specifically mushrooms, add a little bit of lion's mane and a little bit of niacin,
Oh,
and you'll increase the memory benefits and dexterity benefits. And he has some research that shows those two things, particularly in older population.
that's so that see that right away, it makes me just think of a nootropic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yep,
taking a nootropic.
exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's super interesting. So
That is
those are the
interesting.
kind of the main protocols or ways people microdose.
Okay. Now, I guess now we can get into some of the risks. And
Let's do one more thing on microdosing, just
okay,
because.
okay.
So
Yeah.
I think mushrooms are more popular than LSD because they're easier to get. And what many people do, so you can certainly go buy. Again, there's some companies that are selling them. Again, Canada has some that are selling them and mailing them to you. But mushrooms, they're found everywhere. So a lot of people have access to mushrooms, and what they're doing is they're taking coffee grinders, just
Yes.
grinding them themselves, taking these little pill makers, putting the grounds in the pill makers, and then making enough capsules. In half an hour, you can make enough to last you 6 months. But again, for everybody out there, it's illegal to do this. So just be aware.
Yeah.
Oh, and sorry, I guess the other part of that is you can find mushrooms and you can also grow them yourself. And there are ways you can buy the spores, and there are lots of mushroom grow kits, and people are growing them in a closet at home. And again, not endorsing, not telling you should do that. It's illegal, but that's what people are doing.
I've heard the exact same thing. And I should put a little disclaimer here. We are not advocating for you to go out and do anything illegal. This is merely a discussion for educational purposes and awareness. That's all. I just
Exactly.
wanted to put that in there because depending on where you are in the world, it's not my job to monitor what's legal in each individual country, but we can talk about it. That's all we're doing here. So, okay, was that all you wanted to say on microdosing or?
I think so. I think that's
Yeah.
it's I, I guess the only other thing I'll add is there are a lot of people who will do a large dose first. They're going to say, I need to do a spiritual exploration. I want to connect with a higher power. I want to explore some deep trauma or explore some shadow. And they want to do some type of deep journey first. Then they come out of that and say, okay, that was beautiful and it was hard. And I don't really want to do that again anytime soon. Some people say, and I'm going to microdose for a while to kind of support as scaffolding to the larger dose experience. So I think what's interesting, Sandy, is that this all of these medicines meet people in all different ways. So some people say, hey, I want a medical model. So I want to go get prescribed ketamine and I want to go to a clinic and I want somebody in a white lab coat and I want them to I want prescription and that's how I want to meet this medicine. And there's others who say, I believe in decriminalization. you shouldn't tell any adult over 21 what plant they can or cannot put in their body. Plants are nature. It should be legal, period. And there's others who say, wait a minute, this is a religious freedom discussion. I want to practice my connection with a higher power by taking these substances that allow me to connect with them in a way that nothing else does. And I should be allowed to do that. I believe it's an and. All three are important. All three should be allowed to coexist. I feel the same way about microdosing and macrodosing. There are some people who say, I'm not ready to go soul searching yet. I just want to dip my toes in the water with some microdosing. Great. Do that. And
Mm-hmm.
there's others that say, I want to start with one of those soul searching, and then I want microdosing. Great. There's a wonderful organization called the Microdose Collective that's working on legalization of microdosing across the states and doing some good work on compiling information and getting the word out on microdosing as well.
I love that. And here's the thing, like we were talking about earlier, when personally, I'm talking about me, when I started to really meditate, practice mindfulness, practice visualization, really calm the mind, spend more time in nature, all of that, I became a different person. I
Mm-hmm.
became a less triggered person. I became a less angry person, a less immediate responsive person. All of these things. Okay, I personally have been able to do that without the psychedelics, which I've
Yeah.
also been, I'm also fortunate that I've had the time to explore different things that work for me, right? So, my opinion is that if everyone was able to achieve these things, however means it takes, because I don't believe in judging how you need to get there. And you know, I think for some people it's just harder to get there. And psychedelics, whether macrodosing or microdosing, might be the way to do it. That's just, totally my.
That's beautiful. Totally beautiful, Sandy. One thing your audience might connect with is there's a website, Moms on Mushrooms, and they are
Ooh.
specifically focused on destigmatizing psychedelics for moms specifically. Um,
Wow.
and they're doing really interesting outreach and education in this space and
I'm
getting a
gonna put
lot of press.
I'm gonna put that in the show notes. Thank you for mentioning that.
Mm-hmm.
Because the one thing, and you're a parent too,
Mm-hmm.
as parents, especially when our children are younger, we really tend to disconnect from our true selves. And I can say that. That was actually when I got sick. I was 41. I don't know if you know that. I had thyroid cancer at 41. My daughter had cancer when she was 5. I was 40. So a lot going on there, but there was a great disconnection because when you're dealing with younger children and raising kids, and then there's activities, and they really need you and they take a big part of you. And so I wish I was able to find that connection at a younger age, the one to myself and to spirit and all of the things that I personally believe in and connect to. But I wasn't able to do that. So that's why I love that there's an organization, Moms on Mushrooms. And I can almost bet that the person who founded that is probably a mom of younger kids, because that's kind of when it begins. You know what I'm saying, Matt?
I totally know what you're saying. I mean, it is amazing. I don't think anyone prepares us for how much work raising children is, and I do, without being too stereotypical. It's certainly in our house, more of the weight fell on my wife on the actual raising of the children than on me.
Me too.
And yeah, and that's there. It definitely took a toll on her. Um, with yeah, and we're a year away from being quote empty nesters,
Yeah.
and it's yeah, it's really interesting to watch her
Yeah.
kind of coming back into the practices that she loved when she was younger,
Yes.
that she just didn't have time for
Yeah.
because so much of this, but she's a teacher as well. So between being a teacher and a primary caregiver, it's a lot. It's a lot.
It's a lot of energy that you're
Mhm.
expending. that you're not really able to preserve for yourself, right? And even still, I mean, any parents out there, that it's tough when you got toddlers, but when they get older,
Mm.
there's a lot of other things that come into play too, right? A lot more complicated issues. And so it's not like it doesn't end. That's why I'm like, get your shit together in an earlier stage, so that you can keep that little piece of yourself and that little practice all throughout, because you're going to need it even when they're in their 20s. That's for sure.
Without a doubt. And this is yeah, I think for me, two things here that's resonating in this discussion is one, we talked a lot about how I would get breaks that she wouldn't. I would fly away for some type of business trip and be gone for 3 days.
Yep.
And I didn't have somebody who constantly needed something from me. She never got those breaks, or very rarely got those breaks.
Yeah,
So that's again just a different, an unequal balance of energy exchange.
totally.
And then the other thing with psychedelics is I think just remembering, sorry, it changed the way I work. It changed the way I spend my time because it takes off some of the masks that I felt I had to be. I was so much of, I am an entrepreneur, I am a business person, I am um, this, that, or the other thing. And no, I don't need to be any of those things. And if once I stop needing to be those things, well, where do you want to spend your time? Well, I want to spend it at home because I love my family. Okay, great. So then spend your time at home and yeah, make that happen. And it's been, again, just a wild transformation for us.
This is actually a very, very, we've still got more to obviously go and cover, but it's a perfect segue
Tell
to a
me.
quote from your book that I wrote
Oh,
down. Okay.
okay.
Okay. This is a quote from Matt Zemon's book, Psychedelics for Everyone. In this moment, the psychedelic medicine allowed me to disassociate from myself, relook at an experience that had haunted me for years, and release the anger, hatred, embarrassment, guilt, and shame that had weighed me down for decades without me even realizing it. And these are the words that also, this is not in a quote, but they came from your book: empathy, spirituality, bliss, emotionally available, vulnerability, words you used in your book to describe your experience from psychedelics. So, do you
Yeah,
want
it's
to expand
these are
on
words
that?
I
It's
was
very
not
powerful.
using. Yeah, and words I didn't really use 5 years ago, 6 years ago. The passage that you're talking about, just for your listeners, the quick story is when I was a young teenager, I had some inappropriate sexual contact with a family member 10 years older. And it was something I was deeply, deeply embarrassed about. So it was one of those things I couldn't even talk about it, but somebody would make a joke and my ears would turn red or my stomach would turn, and I knew. But so buried away, so tucked into a shelf that it wasn't even something I would make as an intention to heal from because I didn't think about it. But it was there, just carried. And
Yeah.
on this one journey, um, we talk about challenging versus bad. So if we can talk more about how you avoid a bad trip, but challenging is where the medicine wants to show you something. So here I was on a journey and I was right back in that situation. I was like, I don't want to be here. But they teach us as you do psychedelics, you've got to breathe into it. You have to ask if the dragon appears, what are you here to teach me, dragon? So I was able to look at this situation and be like, okay, wait a minute. So here's a woman who had been rejected from her father, who was not feeling loved, who was not feeling smart, who was struggling with substance use challenges. And I didn't have to condone the behavior um, to understand the human aspect of it. And that was really eye-opening. Okay, I can understand. I don't like it. I don't condone it, but I can understand it as a human. And with that, I was able to let it go. It's not mine to carry. And now I can talk about it. And I don't feel embarrassed. It was something that happened, but it doesn't define me. And I just get it, and in one afternoon for that to go away after 20 some years. It was amazing. Amazing.
I interviewed someone a while ago. I don't know if you know who she is, Michelle Norris. She's one of the co-founders of Paleo FX.
Okay. I do. I know of
And
Michelle.
we were talking and she requoted a quote, the issues are in our tissues,
Hmm. Yeah.
right? It's I think it's a widely used quote. And I think, you know, sometimes it's really, really hard to get to those issues that are in our tissues, right? Without
Hmm.
having shame around it or just wanting to push it down further. And, I can honestly say, even myself right now, there are things I would not talk about here, right? So, just because I wouldn't talk about it, does that mean it's unresolved? I don't know.
Well, it's clearly
Um,
something that you don't feel comfortable sharing. It's something that you feel you'll be judged, and
yes,
that so
yeah,
yeah, there's something there.
there's something there.
There's something there. It's one of the things that many of these medicines do is it removes shame, blame, and guilt.
Mm,
So that's actually why let's go back to MDMA for a second. Why it's so powerful as a couples therapy medicine. And actually, the best practice in couples therapy with psychedelics is that well before you have marital issues, do MDMA sessions once, twice a year. Um, and because you both are removing shame, blame, and guilt. You're both feeling love for yourself and love for the other. And then you're able to have incredibly real conversations. Like when you do whatever it is you do, that makes me feel this way. And the other can say, oh my goodness, I did not know that without being defensive.
yeah,
I can see that because I'm really looking at you with the same love that we looked at each other back when we first discovered each other. And I don't want to hurt you. I don't want you to feel that way. And I can see it, and I'll make that behavioral change because it wasn't that you told me or that some therapist, marriage counselor told me. It's I understood. We
mm,
connected energetically. I understood. It doesn't have to be best practice is probably not a sexual experience. It's just an energy exchange for a few hours using this technology to reconnect with your loved person. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful
mhm.
that can be unlocked in that situation. So it can be powerful by yourself for all the reasons we talked about a moment ago, and it can be powerful with somebody you loved, and it can be powerful. I've seen it with people and their kids, intergenerational, beautiful. And
Really,
I've seen it with 80-year-olds and 50-year-olds, and I've seen it with 50-year-olds and 25-year-olds, and it's beautiful
really,
because we all do it. We all do it. We all have how much of what we carry around is because our parents didn't love us in the way we wanted them to love us. And how much of what we do, at least for I'll speak for myself, how much of I know so much of what I do was trying to get my parents to love me, to keep my parents loving me, because I saw them get divorced at a young age, and my father was an alcoholic and always on the verge of rage when he was drinking. And I don't know. I was worried that is my mom going to leave me like she left him? And yeah, I mean, we do all sorts of things. And then again, on these journeys, it's like, okay, wait a minute. They were giving me all the love they knew how to give because I could actually random story, but journeys going back to them and their childhood. Oh wow, my mom lost both of her parents before she was a teenager, and my father lost his father when he was 12. And what were they dealing with? And then how did they find each other? And what were they latching onto? And I can understand differently.
yeah.
And then what behaviors that I didn't like of my parents am I doing with my own kids?
Oh,
I just
yeah.
and that's beautiful to play in that space. And again, just play in that space without judging yourself, to just be aware of, oh, wait a minute. When you hated when you felt abandoned when your parents did this, that, and the other thing, and yet I abandoned my kids when I fly away on these business trips. Hmm, that's how it has to feel to them. Is that what I want them to feel? No. Are we talking about it as a family? We're not. Do we need to
Yeah.
talk about it as a family? We do. Um, yeah. So
That's a
Powerful
very,
medicine.
yeah, that's a very interesting point too, because, like you said, like, even if you have older children and you want to address certain things, like I I'm a pretty deep person, and I've had conversations with my 22-year-old where I've said, do you remember this? And did this hurt you when you were younger? And I'm sorry if it did. And they look at me like, huh? What are you talking about? Because they're not on the same plane as me. You get what I'm saying? So it makes sense, like whether it's with your partner or whomever, you kind of get on the same plane to be able to address things, right?
I
Does that
love
make
that.
sense?
Yeah, I really like the way you said that. And it is interesting in how we even approach our children. And sometimes it's it's asking the question and them not understanding the question. And sometimes it's just receiving the answer. Tell me about when I hurt you when you were a kid,
Yeah.
and being able to hear that. Like, wow,
Yeah.
and some of those are, God, there's no way that hurt you, or there's no way that's nothing compared to when I was a kid. You don't know, you don't know bad,
Yeah.
but it did. It was important to them.
Yeah.
Um,
But I find too, to be able to get them in that mind space
mhm.
is not necessarily easy,
No,
you
it's
know.
not.
And what I do find pretty interesting is that some things that stick in my mind, they don't even remember. They're like, huh?
Hmm.
What?
I
I don't
remember
remember
that.
that. Right?
Yeah.
And yet it's in your mind and you want to address it and resolve it and release it because it's still there.
It's still there and it's not there. So it's still there inside of you, and it does need to get released because it's just a construct of a memory.
Yeah.
Um, but that's not the healing, and everything is in the now,
Yeah.
which in that discussion you're having with your 22-year-old sounds like a really important discussion.
Yeah. It is. So, okay, I wasn't expecting this, but this is actually such a great talk. Okay. Now, I have to ask a couple of questions.
Sure.
There is people talk about doing various plant medicines in a safe container
Hmm.
versus, hey, I'm going to go fly to South America and find a tribe and just hang out and do some ayahuasca. What are your thoughts on that?
So the research shows that there are three things to pay attention to have a most likely to have a good experience: source, set, and setting. So
Okay.
source is, where did your medicine come from? So if you're getting it in the medical space, it's probably from a pharmacy. So you know your source is pure. If you're getting it in the ceremonial space or in the underground space, you don't know. And you want to really make sure that you trust whoever it is that you're buying it from, or that you test your drugs. So whether you go to Dance Safe's website and you buy test strips, or you go to Drug Checker and you send some of your drugs in and let them test it for you. There's options to test your own drugs. But so much of what people buy on the street is not what they think it is. And that's why we're seeing kids dying of fentanyl overdoses
Yes.
all over this country. Heroin, yeah, it's a challenging medicine, but it's not, it's the fentanyl that is really killing people. Or killing people at such a ridiculous extreme, over 100 some thousand, 140,000 drug overdoses.
Terrifying.
Compared to a Portugal, which is decriminalized drugs, which rarely kills anybody, drug overdoses. Um, so sources, yeah, where does the medicine come from? Set is your mindset. So whoever you're working with, again, medical or spiritual, or you're doing it by yourself with a friend, are you prepared? Do you have your intention set? Do you know how long whatever medicine you're taking is going to last? Do you understand the physical effects in your body? Do you understand what might come up? Are you prepared? Are you in a are you is your mindset prepared for what you're about to do? And then the setting is the physical space safe? Are you free from distractions? Are there going to be kids walking in, dogs barking, music that's loud, people you don't know? When you're on this type of substance, you're in an incredibly vulnerable position. So you want to make sure that you are safe, that the people around you, you know, and you trust, and that they love you, and that you're going to be okay. And this is, again, medical or spiritual. Doesn't make a difference. There are people in the medical practice who I think could implement better practices, and there's people in the spiritual who could do both. But one of the reasons why um, most of the research with MDMA, as an example, is done with two people in the room, is it gives you two sets of eyes um, on the person. It's safer for the person. A lot of the ceremonial settings, you have 20 people in a room with then multiple facilitators and musicians or sitters or guardians or people, again, just to stay safe. So source set and setting is incredibly important if you're going to do a large dose of psychedelics. Asking, if you go the medical route, asking your medical professional, what are you giving me in advance to prepare me? Maybe they don't do anything. There's a bunch of clinics down here where it's, oh, you just show up, we're going to give you an IV. Well, okay, it's not that that's wrong, but if you want more than that, you need to find the preparation, intention setting, and integration somewhere else.
Mm.
Um, Super cool study that I always talk about is this one out of Imperial College London, which is harm to self and harm to others. The Dr. David Nutt said, let's forget how drugs are scheduled and just look at harm to self and harm to others. On his chart, the most dangerous drug for harm to self and harm to others is alcohol. It's like a 73 on his chart. For perspective,
Wow.
heroin's like a 55, crack cocaine's a 54. So alcohol,
Wow.
incredibly dangerous to yourself, incredibly dangerous to others. On the far right-hand side of the chart is mushrooms. It's a 6. LSD is a 7. MDMA is like a 9. So all of these drugs have risks associated with them. And rather than say one is safe and one is not, we just say risk reduction.
Okay.
But I believe when people are thinking about taking these substances, while there's a risk, the risk is reduced versus other substances that are legal. And that is just something else to think about as you're pondering what's going to be
Yes.
right for you.
So interesting. I did not know that about alcohol. And then you look at people and, you know, there's a lot of people who drink.
There's a lot of people who drink. There's a lot of people who put themselves into very vulnerable positions. There's a whole, I mean, into driving positions, into non-consent positions, into all
Yeah.
sorts of things, into physical violence, into missing work days, into hangovers, into liver issues. It goes on and on.
Yes.
Super interesting side note. Bill W., the guy who founded Alcoholics Anonymous, created did his first kind of um, realization that he wanted to do this came during a psychedelic experience. He wanted LSD to be part of the first step in the 12-step program because the first step is giving yourself to a higher power. He thought, some of these, or he used the term drunks, would have a hard time doing this. And they would, if we could give them a forced spiritual experience, they would be able to do this first step easier. And then I believe in Saskatchewan, up there in Canada, that whole province had LSD as part of the alcohol treatment up until I think 1970, maybe even later.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
That
Yeah,
is so
it's
interesting.
it is yeah, the results with psychedelics, with alcohol, psychedelics, with smoking, psychedelics, with eating disorders, tremendously successful.
Wow, looks like us Canadians have done a lot of work in this area, Matt.
You've done a bunch of stuff, and you just did the Section 56 exemptions up there, which is against, is it as fast as people would like? No, but you're allowing some people to get this Section 56 exemption and use psychedelics for therapy purposes. It's hard to get. There's not as many facilities, but it's happening. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I
there's definitely things happening in Canada.
yeah, I've heard that. I have definitely, although most of my listeners are American, like 83% of you listeners are American. So that's interesting. Um, okay, question.
Sure.
Because I always like to talk about, like, I think it's important to talk about this because we hear things, right? And I have heard this story that when you take or go on an ayahuasca trip,
Mm-hmm.
you better be prepared of what I think it's a feminine plant, shows
It
you,
is. Mm-hmm.
what she shows you. And if you do not pay attention, meaning you complete the ceremony, complete the trip, and then ignore everything, she will continue to show you through anxiety and all kinds of ways until you address whatever she shows you. What do you think of that?
I think there's a bigger picture to that, which is kind of the universe. We're all moving forward. That's all we do. We move forward, we learn, we heal, we grow, and then at some point we die. And then hope we continue in some other form. The universe sometimes sends us messages, and maybe it looks like a little splinter, and then it becomes a pencil, then it becomes a branch, and then it becomes a tree. Um, During the journeys themselves, the best practice is surrender. Let the medicine show you whatever the medicine. Release your expectations. You might go in with intentions, but let them go when the journey starts and let the medicine show you what it needs to show you. If you resist what it's showing you, like you try to run away from that dragon that I was talking about earlier, it can be a really challenging experience. It can get dark.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to breathe through it. You want to remember you're okay. You want to let the dragon, let Mother Ayahuasca show you what she needs to show you. Um, when you leave that experience, then I think the universe continues to show you, it continues to reinforce the messages, but the messages are there all the time anyhow. In my opinion, I think it's a I think we live in an abundant world, and I think we can look at it through the lens of abundance, or we can look at it through the lens of scarcity. But that these messages saying you are enough, you wake up, it's gonna be okay, it's always been okay. They're real, and I think at the and then I think the last thing I'll say is that psychedelics differ from traditional therapy, and ayahuasca. I'm going on this too, in that you're not giving your agency to someone else. No one is saying to you, Sandy, I know better than you how you should be. I know what you're missing. No, that's not how it works. The medicine is allowing you to find your inherent wisdom and remember that, oh, I am wise. I am beautiful. I am enough. I am loved. And I don't need any external validation of those things. And then from that root of confidence, how do you want to move forward with your life? And that's an incredibly powerful gift that these medicines can give.
So I'm not going to go and do ayahuasca, come home, divorce my husband, leave my family, change my life, or maybe I would. I don't know.
And that's only for you to find out and
Right.
for you to know. And so one of the safe practices of psychedelic journeys is after your journey, you don't make any decisions, any major life decisions for 2 weeks to 2 months. Pick a number and just agree. If it's still important after X amount of time, then I'll do this. But there are people who go on these journeys and realize, oh my gosh, I really do love my spouse and my family. And this is so important. And I have not been living my life. I know this is true, but I haven't acted as if it's true. Okay. And then they're going to have a set of behaviors that they're going to want to implement. And there's others that say, oh my God, I got married too young. I've been living this to please my parents or to please my spouse or to please his parents or her parents. And this isn't where I should be. And and that's okay. It's okay. And I do want to make change and I want to do it consciously and I want to do it lovingly. And there's no bad anybody in that story. It just is. And that's okay. And then I can move forward because I'm not judging myself. Oh, I'm so bad. I'm so stupid. I shouldn't have done this when I was 30 years ago or 20 years ago when I made this decision. Or no, it's okay. You did the best you knew then. And now you're have a different level of confidence. You're not afraid of losing the things that come with that package. And that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no, yeah, it's each individual knows, and sometimes this gives them the confidence to act in either direction in the way that they need to act, not because anyone told them they need to act that way, because they know they need to act that way to be in alignment for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. We did talk about, it's a pretty heavy conversation, Matt. Um, we talked about the scale. Where would somebody be able to find that? Like, you mentioned alcohol is up here at
Oh,
73.
sure.
Where would someone
Um,
find that?
I will send it to you so you can put it in the show notes. But I
Okay,
think
yeah.
if you just typed in Imperial College London, um, nut is NUTT, and then I think harm to self. I bet
Okay.
you it'll, yeah, alcohol. It pops right up.
So it's there.
Um, it's there. Yeah.
I think that's important. Like, would you recommend that if somebody is going to first start with psychedelics, first of all, intent, you've been talking about intent. Like, what's your intent? Like, what do you want to get out of this? Is important or not important?
It's super important. I mean,
Okay.
I don't think anyone should, if you're, so one of the things again about psychedelics, this is powerful, powerful, powerful medicine. So you really don't want to do this if you don't want to do this.
Yeah.
So this is, you're not doing this for me or your partner or your parents or your
Right.
friends. You're doing this because you want to do this. And even if you can't verbalize why you want to do this, if you're still listening to this show an hour into this, something's calling to you here,
Yeah.
or else you still wouldn't be listening. So then it feels like we're now more into, well, how do I do this versus should I do this? Or maybe you're listening to this because someone else, because of, you're thinking about someone you love deeply. How can I help them find access to this versus the other? But but yeah, knowing to the best that you're able, it can be, I want to curb my use of alcohol. Where does this come from? I'm eating more than I like. I'm eating less than I like. I'm not I'm not sharing love. I'm not feeling love. Those can all be reasons. Or it can be, I don't know. I just feel blue. Where is the source of this blueness?
Mm.
Okay, you're experiencing some blueness. What is the source? That's a great intention. Or I know there's something else and I want to explore it. Or I don't feel connected. I feel so alone. Show me, am I connected? Those are all great reasons. Um,
I want to
yeah,
increase my creativity in what I do, right? Some people just want to improve and kind of tap into that creativity that they're unable to tap into in a normal setting in
yeah,
life.
where I want to feel more joy. I want to feel more creativity. I want to remember how to play. What happened to play? We used to spend all day outside playing. And where did that go? When did life become not about playing?
Yeah.
I want more time for play. How can I get it back?
Mm.
And then it's remembering, oh my God, there's nothing changed. I've just am not doing it. I still love to play. So why am I not doing it? I'm not doing it because I'm afraid. What am I afraid of? I'm afraid there's not enough. There's not enough for what? There's not enough for who? Well, because I'm doing this, that, or the other thing. Well, do you love this, that, or the other thing, or do you love playing? And then again, it's realization followed by um, knowing of what you want and getting clarity around that, and then followed by this neuroplastic stage you enter to, and I want to change my behaviors to actualize these realizations, whatever those are for you, and it's all possible.
Does anything actually happen? Have any studies been done on what happens to the brain after doing psychedelics?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good studies. One of the professors that if you can type in, we can put these in the show notes, is Robin Carhart Harris. Has got a bunch of different scans, so you can see what a brain looks like, what the neural connections look like, kind of not regular, and then what it looks like on psilocybin. Dr. Crystal, there's a bunch of work at Yale with ketamine, and what the neural connections look like, and then the new neurons that start to grow and how that
Really?
continues. Yeah, these medicines continue to impact your brain after the medicine's gone,
And not in a negative way. They don't
and
like
not in a negative
kill
way.
your they don't kill your brain cells.
No, No, they actually grow
Wow.
new neuron connections and they strengthen the ones that you have, which is again, it's incredible to think about. The let's actually talk about this for just a moment. So as
Sure.
we all get older, we literally um think the same way. We get into repetitive thinking patterns. So the analogy, since you're up in the Northeast, would be you're skiing down the mountain and you're literally, as we get older, we keep skiing down the same tracks to the point where, oh, I can't get off of this track. This is this track I'm on. And now that can manifest for all of us in different ways. On one extreme, that can be autism and that type of repetitive thinking patterns. It can be an eating disorder, or it can be an alcohol use or a substance use challenge, or it can just be this is how I think. The psychedelic puts like a fresh coat of powder on the mountain and allows you to ski in ways that you used to ski. And it's like, oh, I forgot I can use this whole mountain. I don't have to ski in these tracks. And I forgot that now that I remember I can do this, I want to do more of this and less of that. Um, and then that's that. So those are the neurons firing together that don't normally fire together, but did at one point in your life. And then with that beacon of light, that lighthouse out there, that remembrance, you can then take that forward into your everyday life following the psychedelic experience. So I tell people all the time, these are not, there is no such thing as a cure. There's no pill that you're going to take that's going to fix whatever it is that you feel is wrong with you. Because first of all, nothing's wrong with you. And these are not just biochemical reactions that a pill is going to change. It's a biochemical, psychosocial, spiritual process. And the psychedelic is a catalyst that then allows you to move forward with new insights and new understandings. And that's where the change is. It's in all of it. But when you lay back, you're just changing your agency from I've given my power over to a pill. I've given my power over to this person. I've given my power over to a therapist. Not any, don't reclaim your power. This is a way to reclaim it and to own it and then to move forward. And that, and at least in my experience and what a lot of the research is saying, is that is where this healing lies. That is where the awakening, for lack of a better word, happens. That you remember, I am enough. I don't need you to tell me that I'm enough. I don't need you to give me your affection. I don't need you to give me your love. I don't need you to give me your permission. I am enough as I am.
Wow. Now, just I want to clarify. So psychedelics can create new neural pathways in the brain.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That is powerful because that's hard to do, right?
It is hard to do,
Especially, once you reach midlife, it's like, that whole saying, can't teach an old dog new tricks, right?
but it's just not true.
But
We are
that's not true.
always learning, healing, and growing, and we can
If
get
we want
stuck
to,
if we
if we
want to,
want to.
if we want to. But I mean, again, there's every cell in our body is going to be refreshed every 7 years. So again, we are changing whether we want to or not. The question is when it comes to our mind and what we are aware of and where we want to go in whatever chapter we're in, what are we going to do with that? And that's where I see again, I spend a lot of time in the ceremonial space. I said we have I spend a lot of time in retreats. And it's interesting to me that 40, 50, 60-year-old, 70-year-old people are coming to these retreats because they're thinking about what's this next chapter going to look like. And the thoughts, it is different from a 40-year-old to a 60-year-old to a 70-year-old. But at the same time, it's all kind of the same. What are we doing here? How are we going to spend our time? Where am I going to feel love from? Where am I going to give my love to? How we can exchange this energy as we move forward. And when we transition, we're not taking any of the things with us. And I think these medicines can help us see that really clearly. And that can again lead to I do have time to squeeze in a yoga class in the middle of the day and my kids are going to be fine. Or the most important thing I can do is have this conversation with my kids and show how okay I am. And it's got to start with me because I create everything in my universe. I am the epicenter of healing in my house. I am the epicenter of healing in my family. And I think that's a powerful, powerful place to start from. I'm 100% responsible for everything in my world. So what is that going to look like?
Very powerful, Matt. Very powerful. Okay, is there anything we've gone over an hour, but it's just such an engaging conversation. That's why I don't put specific time limits on my shows. So, is there anything that we didn't cover that you'd like to cover? Because we have to definitely leave people with where to go. Where we did talk about a few websites, but maybe I'm sure that they can get in touch with you through your website to kind of get the
Absolutely.
process going.
I'm sure. I mean, I can answer. I'm happy to answer questions. I really feel like that's what I'm here to do.
And you do
I hope
retreats, right?
I am involved with retreats, sure, that are yeah, yes is the short answer. And I think that's a good what are the questions that you want to ask anybody if you're going to dip your toes into these waters, whether it's again medical or spiritual, what are the questions to ask? So, where does your medicine come from? How do you know it's pure? How long will these medicines impact me? What is the experience going to feel like? How are you going to help me prepare for my journey? Do I need to have a therapist on my own or a guide or a coach to help me? Um, During the session itself, am I by myself? Am I with 10 people, 20 people, or 100 people? Who's in the room? Are you going to take a medical intake from me and make sure that whatever medicine you're giving me is safe for me?
Mm-hmm.
Who, what type of person looks at that medical intake if you're not a doctor? After the ceremony, what type of integration are you going to offer me? Or do I need to go somewhere else for integration? No wrong answer. I just want to know. Tell me.
What's integration? What is that? Explain.
Integration is the process. So now you've come out of a psychedelic journey.
Right.
You've opened up, you've seen a lot of things that you hadn't seen before. You've remembered things that you haven't remembered. How do you process that?
Right.
So in the ceremonies that I'm involved with, people get kind of 4 weeks of homework. They get prompts each week, and each week there's a call, and people come on and they share what they're thinking about, and they start unpacking those items. And in a kind of a in a ceremonial sense, that's enough support for a lot of people. Others, they need more space. They need more time to talk. They need more time to process. And those we refer up to integrators or therapists, or it doesn't have to necessarily be a licensed person, but it's someone who understands you don't need to interpret anything for that person. You don't need to tell them what they thought. You need to help them unpack it themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and have that power for themselves. So that's what a really good integration coach does. And yeah, and at least I think 4 sessions at least following a psychedelic journey is important. And just one more thing, and I'll stop is the community. Okay, if I do this, is there a community either in person or virtually that I get to be a part of for that? Because after 4 weeks, I still have things I want to talk about, and I've grown connected to the people I journeyed with. And do I get an experience? Do I get to have anything like that? Some say yes, some say no. But those are all good questions to ask. And
Okay.
that's again in whether you're going to a medical clinic for ketamine or a Section 56 exemption, or you are doing medical tourism or psychedelic tourism and you're flying to the Netherlands or to Jamaica or to Costa Rica or to Colombia, or you found I mean, there's over 200 psychedelic churches in America. It's a big number. So maybe you found one of those and that's what you want to do. These are all good questions to ask for any of those situations. Oh, a couple other. Is there going to be a male and a female? Who's leading the ceremony is a good question to ask, or giving me the diagnosis. Do you have a plan if something goes wrong? And when something goes wrong, more often than not, it's not about the psychedelic, it's the stuff around it. I had a trip and a fall. I fell on the way to the bathroom. It's those types of things. It's life happening when you're in a non-ordinary state of consciousness.
Oh,
So what do you do? Yeah, that's the life
what
happens period. The medicine itself is pretty relatively safe,
have
but
you
life still happens.
okay, have you ever experienced a complete and utter like somebody loses their shit and you have, and as you know, somebody who's leading a group, that you have to help them, because honestly, like, I feel like some people would have such fear and anxiety with a loss of control. Have you ever had
I,
that situation?
so one of the things that happens again in the ceremonial space, as you say up front, sorry, and let me be clear, I don't actually run any ceremonies. I'm not a medicine person. I'm not a shaman. That's not my
Okay,
role.
okay,
I help put containers together
okay,
that people
gotcha.
come and participate in, and we bring in facilitators and bring in musicians and bring in chefs and all that kind of stuff.
Okay,
But to your point, I've watched hundreds of people do journeys at this point.
yeah.
Um, what the facilitators typically say is there's no right or wrong way to have this experience. You're going to journey within, and we've evolved over all these millions of years, and we have tear ducts. So if you need to cry, you need to cry, and if you need to laugh, you need to laugh, and if you need to scream, you need to scream. Um, and in ceremonial settings, that's all beautiful, and I think it's powerful to. It's an honor to be in the room with 20 other travelers when those things are happening and to feel the energy, to feel
Mhm.
your body kind of react and send love to a person without moving, but just to send them love and then to feel love when you need love from these people in the room. It's 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 an incredibly beautiful thing to watch. Have I ever seen anyone lose their shit that I thought like, this person's well beyond the losing the shit normal thing? I have seen it once, not in a ceremony I was involved with, but when I was participating in. And what it had turned out is that person had lied about what's medicine that they were taking.
Oh,
they were not honest on the medical intake. And they
oh,
had a bad reaction,
oh,
had a challenging reaction. That was scary to watch for a few hours. The next day they were fine, but it was scary to watch.
yeah,
Um, I will tell your listeners that the medical intakes that all of the practitioners in the space do is not to say no to anybody. It's because they want to keep you safe.
yes,
So it might be that, oh, you thought you wanted to do X psychedelic. You're probably a better candidate for Y. Or you thought you want to do ceremonial psychedelics in a group of 20, and you know what? You probably need to do a one-on-one session first. Um, or we need to have an extra couple people here because you might have, I mean, especially I'll use veterans as an example, especially veterans who've served time in uh, overseas. Yeah, they sometimes need more support. Sometimes don't, but sometimes do.
yeah,
And we just need as organizers to be prepared for that. Um, if you're an active suicidal, that's not the time for ceremonial psychedelics. But
right.
ketamine with a one-on-one psychiatrist, yeah, that is a good use for that. So
Hmm.
that's all. We're not, no one's trying to say no to you. They just want to keep you safe. So being completely honest on those forms is super, super important.
That makes sense. And then you work with somebody who obviously knows what they're doing, to choose, to help choose the right medicine, help choose the right setting, the right,
The right
you know,
music, the right
everything.
pacing,
Yeah,
everything. And let's talk just, there are people out there who've had 10, 20 sessions and they're like, oh, I'm qualified to serve medicine. That's probably not okay. There's the people who are really practicing this have done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of ceremonies, and have really done a lot of work with themselves and on themselves before ever serving medicine. So asking, what is your background? Where did you learn to serve this medicine? How much of you experienced
right.
before doing this? These are all good questions to ask as you think about who are you going to trust with this very yeah, this, I mean, this incredibly profound experience. Who do you want to trust with that?
And they're not necessarily licensed therapists.
Most are not. If you do
Okay.
the medical route, so again, medical ranges from I'm a nurse anesthesiologist, so I know ketamine, so I'm qualified to give you ketamine. Hmm, that's interesting. Versus the ceremonial route, which is I've been part of a lineage serving ayahuasca for hundreds of years, and I learned from my father, who learned from his father, and this is what we do, and everything in between. Um, yeah, there isn't the licensure question is super complicated, especially when you get between ceremony and medical. It's super interesting to me that we've had in the olden days, there was no division between the priest and the physician. It was one role. And in Western society, they're two very different roles.
Very.
The physicians, their role is to cure and to be, quote, pure science. So they oftentimes don't have spiritual backgrounds or spiritual knowledge. Um, and it's fair to say, well, if we're to give psychedelics, and become complicated because which realm do they live in? If you give it to the clergy, it would be fair to say, well, they don't have the physical knowledge to keep us safe. And if you give it to the physician, well, they don't have the spiritual knowledge to get me where I need to go.
Mm.
So how do I believe we need a readjustment, a medical religious model that combines these two things and has both sides learning from the other, and that allows practitioners on both sides to actually do the work, because so many of us need this. But the spiritual side can incorporate the best practices from the medical community and incorporate upfront medical screenings and intakes and informed consent and those kinds of best practices. And the medical community can incorporate a lot of the spiritual things. Do this in groups. Let's reduce the cost by, and you can even increase your cost per hour, but have 20 people in the room versus one.
Mm.
And now it's more accessible.
Mhm.
Do this as a ceremony. This is, again, not just biochemical. There's a college right down the street from me that just got a $27 million grant from the Department of Defense to remove the hallucinogenic components out of psychedelics. I feel like they're missing the point.
What?
Yeah. There's a bunch of studies being done on that. Can we give them can we just take the biochemical reaction of psychedelics and make the cures happen? And a lot of us in the community feel you're missing the point.
Yeah.
It's a journey.
But that's just like, oh, I'm going to go and do a visualization meditation session without the visualization. You know what
It's
I'm
exactly
saying?
that.
Like
Yeah,
there's like
I
a
love
whole
that.
point of me doing a visualization is so I can see what I want to see.
Exactly.
That doesn't make sense to me. Very interesting point though, as well, what you're saying, because it's just like I try and tell people you should not be going to your GP for advice on supplements. They are not trained in therapeutic grade supplements. You know what I mean? Like you need to go to somebody who's trained in nutrition and supplements, not a GP. So go to the right person, people. That's all we're going to say here.
I
Um,
like that.
okay. Well, this has been amazing. Please tell everyone the best way to find you. Tell us about your book, where we can find your book, and all of that, Matt.
So I have two books that people can have access to. Psychedelics for Everyone is available everywhere books are sold. There's an Audible book where all the pieces I wrote, I read, and then women who wrote different pieces read their sections. So it's a great it's kind of fun on the Audible. I also have a book called Beyond the Trip, which is a psychedelic preparation and integration journal. And that it actually has lots of prompts and exercises that you can use before, during, and after your psychedelic journey. I'm active on LinkedIn, I'm active on Instagram, and truly, truly happy to answer questions. So if you want to reach out to me from my website, which is mattzemon.com, yeah, happy to help any way I can. And yeah, anything I can do, I'm happy to do it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Matt. This has been a fabulous conversation.
Sandy, I thoroughly enjoyed this. Thank you for
Yeah,
diving so deeply and taking this much time. That was
yeah,
that's impressive. So thank you.
it was great. Thanks. Okay, I hit stop on